Welcome. First of all, a really big thank you to everyone for coming out tonight. I know these are suboptimal conditions, and whether you're a new friend who's never been here before, or you're a great old friend of Head House Books, I want to say thank you, because it's not ideal. And as some great old friend pointed out, it's the Eagles are playing.
Oh, they won. Yeah, they won.
Good.
I know.
Anyway, so I'm Richard DeWingert, the very proud owner of Head House Books, which I started 17 years ago. And it keeps getting better and better. And as Ken and I were talking, it offered a bridge to a number of communities of which I'm a part. And we learn from each other and the challenges, the successes, and we just keep moving forward. So that's why tonight is so exciting to have Ken, and huge fan of Angela in your book. And now a huge fan of you, Ken. But I knew Angela before.
I'm more of a local.
Oh, cool. I said to someone, you're a rock star here in Philadelphia. So, anyway, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I'm going to leave it up to the two of you to converse and keep it fluid. I don't want to take up a lot of airspace. I just want to say thank you and enjoy yourself.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Richard, thank you so much. Yes, let's applaud Richard.
Wild applause for Richard.
I'm glad they have high chairs because Ken's really tall, but I'm really short. So I'm also going to make it brief because I'm not the star of the show today. Ken and I are related, and if you haven't figured it out, by marriage, I'm married to Ken's nephew who's sitting over there, Jason. So I took the white last name, I guess. And I'm not the star of the show, but it's my honor to do the introductions. And actually, Ken will argue that he's not the star of the show either. So I'll let him explain. But I've known Uncle Ken, as we call you, since I was dating Jason. And I'll just say that since I am a psychologist, but I'm not clinically trained, anytime there was a real question of, what to do in a crisis, or just to help people to, be happier, to, deal with the, slings and arrows of everyday life, I would always go running to Ken. So Ken will tell you the story of how this book came to be. But I can't think of a more urgently needed book than this book right now. And I think it's perfectly done because it's real stories of real people. And even though, some would say the best part of the book are the experts who have the FAQ. I don't know. I think you can make a very good argument that it's the families that are in the book, and that's a big part of this evening. So there are only 2 microphones. I think the microphones are not for amplification; they're for live stream. Hello. So I'm going to allow Ken to take the limelight as he deserves it here, and then I'm going to leave my microphone on the chair for the next person.
We may bring you back in later for grit-related discussion.
I'm going to be here listening, and thanks for having us. We're also, is this bookstore not amazing?
Adorable,
yay!
fantastic.
So thank
it's
you
perfect.
for Head House. Yeah, okay.
It's
thanks.
perfect. Thanks, Angie. So if I had a nickel for every time I had somebody ask me, are you related to Angie Duckworth? And I say, I am so lucky to say I am related to Angie Duckworth. So we're doing a national book tour. And people from the book in that location are arriving at each city. It turns out we have 2 of the grittiest people you've ever wanted to meet in tonight's discussion. So it's kind of perfectly organized. My world famous niece, rock star niece, 2 amazing people from the book. And I want to tell you a little bit about the book, and then we'll hear from them. So my name is Ken Duckworth. I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm the Chief Medical Officer of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. NAMI never had a book. And that always struck me as ridiculous, because this is the largest mental health team in America that has done the most advocacy, support, changing the world, the 988 number, which you may have heard of, the Crisis 9. That's NAMI's work, right? So we just got $30 million from Mackenzie Scott the other day. We have game, but we never, woohoo! Woohoo! I asked for a book tour Learjet, but that didn't work. No, I did not ask for a book tour Learjet. Anyway, so now we never had a book. And I always felt like this was such a missed opportunity. Because if you can hang out with people in the NAMI community, they have learned so much. from their lived experience. And so I became a psychiatrist because my dad had terrible bipolar disorder and was a lovely human being. And I grew up in Glen Olden. I would have gone to Interborough High School with my siblings. And when I was 8 years old, I was playing in the basement. You know how every kid makes a fort under blankets and books? I was about 7 or 8. I was second grade. And my dad was booming upstairs. And I walked up the stairs, and I saw the police cart him off. He goes to then Byberry State Hospital, which is since closed. And then we're in a U-Haul moving to Michigan about 3 months later. And I'm in second grade, and I'm like, I think this has to do with that, because our family is a Philadelphia family. I mean, Jason's here, Angie's here. Like, our family's from Philadelphia. We're the Eagles fans. My older brother took us to the Super Bowl that the Eagles won. You know, like, this is part of the family culture, is being from Philadelphia. So we just get airdropped into Michigan. Well, it turns out my dad had lost his job. And Chef Boyardee said, Duckworth, you've screwed up one time too many here in Philadelphia. But if you want a job in Detroit, you can take it or leave it. So we moved to Detroit. So I grew up in Michigan, so I'm into polite driving, college football, and public education. Like, I picked up some things from Michigan. So I'm not against Michigan, but my root is really Philadelphia. And so I needed a kind of book like this. What about real people? What did they do? How did their families communicate better than mine did? We had so much silence in our family. Like, we were moved 350 miles, but nobody could talk about it. It seemed like, what is that force that could be so powerful? And the only answer could be a serious mental health condition. So I decided to become a psychiatrist to make sense of this and to help my dad. And I sucked at math, and I was weak at science. Like, I never won a science, like the volcano in 6th grade. Like, I never won the science fair, not even once. I learned that I was interested in history and college football and mostly goofing off. And I wanted to help my dad, though. Like, I really thought this was a wonderful human being who really had something that was very devastating. He'd become psychotic. He'd be hospitalized for long periods of time. And he was the most fun and playful. And my cousins would say to me, my cousin Jim said to me, how come you got the fun one? I'm like, I know, right? He's fantastic. He's just also extremely ill. And that was the complexity. So I got into the medical schools that didn't require calculus. It turns out there are 9 medical schools that do not require calculus. And I'm delighted to report to you, I get into all of them. And it turns out you don't have to be good at calculus to be a doctor. And I wasn't that good at organic chemistry either. It turns out you don't have to be that good at organic chemistry. You know something? It never comes up. Organic chemistry and calculus never come up. What's the best psychotherapy to help this person? It's not really a calculus question. What is the role of clozapine in the treatment of schizophrenia? It's not really organic chemistry. It's a drug. It works. It helps people. It saves lives. So anyway, so it turns out, you know, the medical school thing might need adjustment over time. So I then become a psychiatrist, and I looked for this book in my little bookstore, the equivalent to this bookstore in Boston. Beautiful vibe. You just love to be in it. And I would look for a book that was a practical guide featuring real people and what they had learned, because I could have used that. Real families and how to solve problems. I could have used that. And then I also wanted, like, what did the smartest people in America think about the most common questions? Like, do I really have to take these meds forever? How do you talk to a family member who doesn't want help? These are the kind of questions that I always wanted to know. And so years are going by now, and all I see is memoir, memoir, memoir. I like a good memoir. I like a story. I'm not against a memoir. They don't really help me answer any of the questions that I had or my patients had. Textbook, 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 textbook. Nobody reads textbooks. I know, because I wrote book chapters for textbooks, and no one ever said, Ken, that book chapter you wrote on engaging the community and mental health services, God, that was really a bodice ripper. You never get this feedback, right? Nobody reads the textbook. So let's just say, Richard, you might have 3 textbooks in here. They're not moving quick. They're not on the, they're not on the grit scale, right? They're not flying out the door. And the memoirs, I think, are interesting, but isn't what I needed. And what I found in working at NAMI and getting to know thousands of people in this beautiful community was that people want practical advice and they want to learn from each other. That's this book. All the royalties go to NAMI. This is a love gift for my dad and for this whole little community. It's the only book I ever wanted to write. People say, you're going to write another book? No, I'm going to goof off. This is the book I wanted. I wanted to write this one book, and I wanted to do it for NAMI. So I want to tell you about 2 of the people that are in the book. And the way it works is any city I go to, there's people in the book from that city. And it just so happens that two of the people in the book I just come to love. And they also showed a lot of grit. And they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves and their stories, which are the essence of the book, our first-person real stories. And I want to emphasize this book is radical because I don't say all the people in the book are confidential. I'm keeping all their privacy. These people aren't my patients. These people are my community. It's completely different. So I happen to be a doctor, so I kind of flipped the whole thing on its head. You could learn from people that have lived with things. You could learn something that is an untapped source of wisdom. We haven't tapped into this at all. This is uncharted territory. So I'm going to start with one of our two people. So we have two big people chairs and two quieter chairs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the speakers come up to the big chairs, and they'll give 5 to 7 minutes to talk, each of them, Nick and Janet. And then we'll take any of the questions that you would like to have about the book, about NAMI, about what you'd want to see in another NAMI project, anything you're interested in related to this entire space. So the first person I want to introduce is a man who is named Nick Emmy, and he's from Bucks County. And I saw Nick in a NAMI man superhero costume at a NAMI convention. And I'm like, who's this dude? And how do I get to know him? And so in New Orleans, he came up to me and we took a picture together. And I was so happy to meet him. NAMI didn't have a superhero until Nick thought of it. And what he said to me is everybody who's living with a mental health condition in recovery is a superhero. This is so beautiful. Can you imagine if my father and my family had heard that back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s? Anyway, it's a whole game-changing way of thinking. So I reached out to him. Some people came to me. I'd say, does anybody want to be in the book? And they'd say, sure. I said, you have to use your name, so it's kind of radical, because once there's 50,000 of these, we can't take them back. Nick I reached out to because I felt like it was malpractice to do a book on NAMI without our only superhero. I'm like, I didn't want to commit book malpractice. So I contacted Nick. I said, would you be willing to be interviewed for the book? I want you to know there's no pressure. The plane's flying, but I'd love to have our only superhero. And here he is. So Nick, take it away. So my two questions for you, and you can discuss anything you'd like.
Okay.
Why?
Thank you. Come up with me, Mommy boy. Come on up with me. So, my two questions, Ken, what are they? What would you like?
Why do you want to be in the book? And what do you hope people get from the book? And I just want to thank you again.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I have to introduce my sidekick, Nami boy, here. I don't do anything without my sidekick, and it helps me out to have you here, Nami boy, so thank you for doing that for me. I appreciate you. So why did I want to be in the book? Because ever since my first visit to a NAMI convention, I literally did lay in bed at night and wonder, what would it be like if NAMI National asked me to do something as NAMI Man or wrote a book or something like that? And I just dreamt about that. I did. And so to ask me to be in this, I don't really think you understand what it's like. I've worked with NAMI Philadelphia and NAMI Montgomery County, who are the Greater Philadelphia affiliates, and without them too, I don't think I'd be who I am or be NAMI Man. It's here. I need you, NAMI boy. I grew up in Levittown, and we came to Philly all the time, and I just knew I was, a not well little boy. I was a very good kid, and I was well behaved and everything, but I had issues, and it started out as anxiety, and then it became an eating disorder. I was bullied in school. Hi, Amy. And I never really felt like I was a part of anything. And so my mom passed away, and afterwards, she was my best friend growing up. And after she passed away, I didn't want to be here anymore. And so I went about trying to end my life, and I did that 3 times. And I was diagnosed with something called schizoaffective disorder. I did not know what that was. I knew what schizophrenia was, and I knew what bipolar disorder was, but I didn't know that there was something like in between the two. And so they prescribed me clozapine. And so what you talk about with that miracle drug, that's part of the reason that I'm in your book. But you know, I went to school, I went to college, and you know, did normal adult things, but I just never fit anywhere. And so I was content with just destroying my own life until I came to NAMI. It was after my dad passed away, and I called NAMI Bucks County, and I had a friend who invited me to try and speak for the Ending the Silence program, and no one ever said, you know, oh, you look pretty sick, Nick, you better not do this stuff. And I was afraid to tell my story because it contained lots of things I wasn't proud of, like addiction and suicide and, you know, all that stuff. I love you, Nami boy. And I just didn't think that I should say that out loud to other people. It's embarrassing. I thought my parents would be embarrassed. And then I realized, I went and did a presentation in a school, and I realized after that presentation that there are tons of other people who deal with this and who also feel like they don't belong anywhere. You know, I don't want other people to feel that way. So, you know, the work that I do at NAMI every day, and I know you know, all day, every day, all day, every day. It's because you know, it's not always easy. It's hard work, but it's worth it because we have people who come up to us at events, and Amy from NAMI Philadelphia can tell you, she's here tonight. It is so nice to hear someone come up to you and say, Nick, you basically saved my life. And you know, I'm sure you hear that too, Amy, and Raina. And that I thought, first of all, did you think I was going to say no? Did you think I was going to say no to being in the book? Did you think I was going to say no?
I mean, you're a superhero and I'm a regular guy.
Oh, please. Please. You were my superhero before I ever put that costume on, and everybody talks about you, Ken. And I'm not trying to be corny, but I will be if you want me to. On a large scale, you could sit down, bud. Go ahead. On a large scale, you know, the amount of people who come to NAMI, I knew that every one of them would have the opportunity to read that story. And maybe not everyone would connect with it, but some people would. And the people who needed to see it would.
The story is how you created the NAMI Man idea.
It was
how you and Debbie came up with it.
Debbie, yeah. There was someone else who was NAMI Man before me. But I put that costume on, and at first I thought, you know, I'm 40 now, but I was not 40 then. And and I thought, oh my gosh, no, I'm not. This is not fun, and it's not cool. But you know what? I put it on, and I put the voice on, and NAMI Man has a personality. And it's me. It's me, and I can't believe it. But people respond to NAMI Man, and it started out just like as a mascot for the walk. And you know, we don't want anyone to be a prince or a princess at the NAMI walk. You have to have a mental health superhero. So I really told myself I wasn't going to cry at this thing, but okay. Here we are. And so I put the costume on and ran around, and everybody gave me high fives and stuff. And then I started doing these fun videos as NAMI Man. And then I thought it's a great way to spread awareness And I hope people think I'm cheesy and corny, and I hope you share it with your friends. And it's a way to get a message out that there is no look to mental health conditions or mental illness. There is no, we're not all, sitting in dark rooms in like wheelchairs, over medicated, drooling on ourselves. There's still people who are, and we are working towards, better lives for them. But this is, people on a daily basis who go to college like me and, can't hack adult life and lose their mom and dad and go through all this stuff and, find drugs and alcohol as a solution, but then also understand that at the end of the day, all of that was mental health and none of it felt like it. And I don't look in the mirror and think I am, a really sick person. I don't look at myself and think I've got schizoaffective disorder and that's all I'm capable of is what I'm doing. To be able to use NAMI Man as more and to be able to, kind of model the change that I want to see in the system is amazing. And that is a really long answer to why I'm in the book and why I do what I do. But I think you should know, Ken, and I told you this before, including peers in this book and including peers like Janet, who you're going to hear from. You'll like her a lot more than you like me. People like us, other people who are still sick or who haven't yet admitted that they are, or who don't know it yet, can see us and think they're in a book, I could do that too. Or they're on a panel discussion and they're experts. I am an expert too. And we are. We're experts on our own lived experience, and this book proves it.
Yay, perfect name.
Thank you.
We're going to bring you back for the Q&A.
Okay, gotcha.
You get a 5-minute break.
Oh, good.
So let me tell you a little bit about Janet Berkowitz. So Janet's from New Jersey and was very kind to make the drive in this terrible rain. And, how you find people in this world is interesting. Janet's not like a NAMI person. She's a superhero, but she doesn't wear a superhero costume. I work in Boston. I'm a psychiatrist. I volunteered at an early psychosis program for 5 years. This is a model where you treat people earlier, like a public health approach, as opposed to waiting until they have stage 4 psychosis. Stage 4 cancer is not as easy to treat as stage 1 cancer, just for example. So this is a transformative model that, wait for it, NAMI advocated for with the federal government, and there's now 300 of these programs, including one across the street at Penn, right? Early psychosis, people are engaged, their strengths are encouraged, their families are involved, they're not just given meds. It's much more complicated. What are your goals? What do you want to do? How do you get into school? How do you get into a relationship living with this? It's a very loving model. It's created in Australia, and we flew that guy to NAMI to learn from him in 2011, and then we decided to bring these programs across America. So that's Janet's sister. So I'm hanging out with her. I volunteer. She was the medical director. We were complaining about the clinic one day. And while we were complaining about the clinic, I said, Janet, Cynthia, I'm going to be moving on. I'm writing a book. And she said, I want to be in your book. Not that many people volunteer to be in the book. But she said, you should know how my sister and I have transformed our friendship over time. And I thought, that's beautiful, because siblings aren't always attended to in our world. And so I had an interview with Cynthia, and it was quite lovely about what she had learned. She's a psychiatrist, what she had learned. And then she said, and Janet this and Janet this. And I said, could we talk to Janet? Do you think Janet would want to be part of the book? Janet is a lived experience expert herself, and also very gritty, right? So, Janet, I want to thank you for everything, for being in the book. So Janet gets into the book through her sister, but their sibling relationship and how much they grew it is a part of the book, because I want people to see, that siblings can really work out a beautiful friendship. All right, Janet, so take it away, and then we'll bring Nick back up. You'll get in the big chairs, and I'll go in the
How do you do these things?
All you gotta do is hold it. Just hold it anyway.
Is this the mic? I could swallow it,
No, it's good. Just
not
go
knowing what
back.
I'm doing.
Oh,
Thank you.
All right, great job. Perfect. Yeah.
I have a loud mouth.
But this is for the live stream. Thank you so much. Hopefully your sister's watching it in Boston.
Hi, I'm Janet Berkowitz. This is so special. I was so embarrassed growing up in my house being bipolar. My behavior was so outrageous. I had all the symptoms of bipolar disorder out the window. And I had been bullied and teased, as you had every day in school. I didn't want to go to school. And came home from school every day crying. So I had shame about that, before the bipolar thing hit the mark. Although I tend to believe, having worked a lot with children, emotionally disturbed children, that bipolar disorder starts at a very young age. My mother knew something was wrong, and she kept taking me to doctors, and they kept saying, "Oh, she's hyperactive," And my mother knew that wasn't it. And so I think for me, I was so much about me and trying to survive that I wasn't aware of what was happening to my family. Not until the book. And not until we did the interview together with my sister. And she started to talk about it. She doesn't talk to me personally too much about it, and I think it's painful for her. I don't blame her, And so it started coming out in the interview, what happened to my parents and how difficult that was for them. And I've been in like 7 hospitals. I've had about 40 shock treatments. I've been in 3-day programs. I've been on 75% of the meds that are out there. And I can imagine. I can just imagine what they went through. But what was more special in that interview was that my sister told me things about me and how much she appreciated me and my advice. Like, she wants my advice, she really cares. Yeah, sometimes that's true. Sometimes she does call me for, some advice. And I was like, wow, I didn't know she was paying attention to that. So that interview was phenomenally helpful to me. I didn't do that. At first, I didn't do it for that reason. At first, I was like, we got to get the word out about suicide prevention, because that's my thing. That's what always brings me back into the mental health field, is I go into extreme fear, and the word suicide starts racing through my head, very like the speed of lightning. And I always put myself in a hospital when I get that close. I have never made an attempt. I'm too scared. So the 2 things that saved my life was I found in Memphis, Tennessee, that they were having live Suicide Anonymous meetings. Now, I had already been clean and sober for about 20-something years. Now I'm 34 years clean and sober. And that was easy. Giving that stuff up was nothing compared to giving up suicidal ideation. So I didn't know what to do. I was too depressed to move to Memphis. So I brought it to New Jersey. I started a couple of meetings in New Jersey where I live. And then my husband started going through it too. Lo and behold, God was in his infinite wisdom brought the 2 of us together. He had been suicidal as a child and didn't realize it until we started doing this work. So we started the Suicide Anonymous meetings, and then he put it online. And I am glad to tell you now that there is a meeting every day, Saturdays too. I dream of the day that we start a Suiteen meeting for teenagers and a Suanon meeting for people who deal with people who are suicidal. Anyone in this room, please consider it. My husband and I, that helped. That really, really helped. But then I had a very lucid dream in which I was working with teens. I had already been teaching theater for many years. I'm a professional mime. I had some mime skits about mental health. And he said, I said to him, I think that if we don't work together on this topic, our marriage won't make it. I don't know why. It came through like I had that feeling. We started full force working in suicide prevention. We were already into the arts, so we used art, mime, theater. We had taught theater together to children, dance, movement. I just started creating all these workshops with him. And we brought them to guided imagery. We teach RAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan, in the form of a scrapbook. I call it Rap Scrap. We created a show together called The Wizard of Iz, I-Z, instead of Oz. It's where the suffering go. And he did this diligently by my side. He was an amazing man, and he passed away 5 years ago. And so I promised him on his deathbed before they put him to sleep, the last thing I said to him is, I will continue this work that we started. And I have. It's been lonely sometimes, but then I meet someone like this guy here and this guy here, and I'm like, I'm not alone. I keep forgetting that's the name of the book. I'm not alone. So we've discovered that what healed us the most was doing this work. Now I'm working on something that he and I started, something called The Bridge, in which we are designing a workshop to bring clinicians and consumers together. We call them challengers. We don't like that word, consumers. I don't think anybody who is one, that's what they call mental health patients. I don't think any of us like that word. No. Right? It's demeaning.
We went with peers in the book.
Yeah.
Yes, but that can be confusing because now I'm a peer specialist. I just got my certification 2 weeks ago. I put it on polka dotted paper when I framed it. Like it had to be, that's the grit in me, I had to do something a little different. So, he and I we just felt that this needs creativity, this topic. And then I designed a role play to help people talk to their suicide as if it were a person. And I did it at this big conference for like 300 people, and it went over so well. And I kept doing it and doing it. I'd have the person sit in the chair talking to someone sitting there being their suicide, not talking, and asking them what's the data, what's your judgments, what's your feelings. And then I'd have them switch. And I would ask the suicide, what's your purpose in their life? Because everything, honest to God, I'm sure a lot of you know this, everything is for good reason. Everything is there for, has a higher purpose. And so I kept leading this role play and didn't ask the question of myself. So one day I set it up in my living room. I had a stuffed animal in a chair, and I did it with the stuffed animal. And what came out of me was, stop people pleasing. That's what's killing you. And that was, that was the big message for me of suicide. And everyone has a different message, And so finally I created a business, Creative Crisis Care. And you see there I'm a mime, And that was to do this was so big. I had, of course, somebody else had to do all of this. I can barely do email, And so I'm just like, I just look at that and I'm really proud of that. So I think that one of the things I hoped to get across, I don't know if I did in the book, but to me, suicide is like a spiritual dilemma. There's something very, very deep in it, and there's something beautiful in it. I love the people I meet in Suicide Anonymous. They are like the most gorgeous people I know. I can open up to them so much. I've been to 18 different 12-step groups for different addictions, and this is the one where people really share and really open their hearts, because I don't know any other addiction that goes that far. It was started by a psychiatrist who was suicidal, and he was in AA, and he studied it, and he showed that it followed all the patterns of other addictions. And so he said, if you make one attempt, it gets easier to do it. And so I was too scared to do it. I never did. So that's my dream, is zero suicide, And also, I got to say this, and I'm not always so popular saying this, is that I don't tell people, we were talking about this before we started, I don't like to tell people don't kill yourself, because that didn't work for me. That was a guilt that people laid on me, and it didn't work. I want people to know that whatever they're going through, embrace it. Just love yourself with it. And even suicide, just talk to it, be with it, nurture it. It's there, it wants attention. All mental illness, All feelings are calling to us. They want attention. Dance them out, draw them out. I have my clients, I put a big piece of paper and I play music and I have them color their anger out. I did it with prisoners. I've done it with all kinds of population. Color your sadness, color your shame. What does shame feel like? That's a tough one for people. That drives people to suicide and drugs and alcohol a lot, is shame. So, yeah, let me see, was there anything else I wanted to tell you? Yeah, you can go to my website. My show is on it. I just love, this is all I've done so many things in my life, everything from making pizza to, cleaning houses. This is all I was born to do. And my play is about that. It's about the fact that in a previous life, I decided to come here and do this. So I invite you to play with that. Whatever you're going through in this lifetime, maybe you chose it before you came, if there is such a thing as reincarnation. So that's my story.
There's a lot of grit in our two experts in the book, lived experience. I'm going to have Nick come back up in a second. I just want to say, I had never heard of Suicide Anonymous.
So this is, again, this gives the lie to the whole thing. So I'm the psychiatrist, I'm on the Harvard faculty. On paper, I look like I should know everything. I don't know everything. In fact, there's all kinds of things that I don't know that you, Nick, have learned and you, Janet, have learned. This is the beauty of the book. I know a few things. I know a few things about being a family member. I know a few things from my own little experience. I know a few things from my training. You also have learned things, and you have learned things. That's the beauty of the book. The beauty of the book is 130 people who've learned something, and together they have about 2,000 years of experience of living with things. And that is, those are lessons that I think, we hadn't really tapped into. So I invite you to ask questions of Nick, Janet, me, and we can bring Angie in as needed. Because I think there's a lot of overlap between Angie's book, believe it or not. Come on up here, Nick. I'll give you the big boy chair.
I think we're about the same height when you're sitting down.
I think there's more overlap than you might think. Right, a mental health book and a book about persistence and passion. Persistence, passion, persistence, passion. I mean, I think there's a lot there. And so, anyway, I am not collaborating with Angie on the next book, but I could. Right, because with the people in this book, there's so much courage and persistence and passion in what they've done. And the courage to use their own names, it's very radical. Use your own names in a book. Once you're 50,000 of them, you can't take it back. I mean, somebody's gonna know about you, right, out in the world, right? So, and you're fine with that.
Yes,
And,
totally.
I was impressed that one of the publishers said, you can't get people to use their names. And I said, isn't that interesting? Because you were right about that a decade ago. It's absolutely true. There's so much shame and so much of a need for privacy. People were afraid. But something's changed over time. And, a lot of things probably had to do with that. Celebrities, athletes, famous people talking about their own mental health condition. And of course, COVID makes mental health a we thing, not a they thing. That's the equation. That's when I knew I should write the book. I've been thinking about the book for 20 years, right? But thinking about a book and doing a book is kind of different. Trust me, I know about that. And so, when the COVID phenomena happened, the immediate calls I got were, my used to old NAMI calls would be about mass murder and mental illness. And after COVID, right after COVID, within 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, isolation. Is teletherapy real? People are overdosing and relapsing. How do you find care? Is video sessions with family members, is that real? All of a sudden I realized these were all the questions that I was interested in.
I asked one time about mass murder and mental illness in the entire 2 years of the COVID run, and I went from 60 calls a year to 500 calls a year. I never got on CNN in the pre-COVID days. I'm not that good looking. I don't know that much. CNN wanted me on 2 nights in a row. I'm like, let's go. Now I said, okay, now's our time to do the book for NAMI about mental health. So that's the story, and it was a privilege to meet Nick. It was a privilege to meet Janet in person. This is the highlight of the book tour, is to see my people, our people. I want to introduce you to Jordan real quick. Jordan sat through 150 hours of Zoom interviews with me and he's been my co-pilot through the whole thing. So, Jordan held everything together, and she joins NAMI, so I needed to help her on the book because I never wrote a book before. if any of you want to write a book, and you can talk to me about what it's like to be a rookie author. So I called our favorite person at NAMI, Terry Briston. I said, I need to help her. And she basically said, would you like a Fulbright scholar who's interested in storytelling and editing? I'm like, yeah. How's that? I'll have that one. Yeah, let's take that. So that's Jordan. So this is how the book happened. And it happened, in a relatively quick order. So any questions you want to have about Nick, Janet, the book, the process, the misadventure of it all? Yes.
First of all, those were such beautiful and important stories, and I think you're so brave. It's wonderful. But I want to know what one, two, or three of you would like mental health professionals in training to understand.
It's funny, when I started doing my own workshops, I kept asking myself, what do I wish I had happen when I was going through, a lot of the healing that I did was not in the mental health field, it was in workshops and trainings I did outside of it, that were more confrontive. I wish they understood, I work with the 5 main feelings, mad, glad, sad, fear, shame. I wish they would have done that with me, like, ask me, what are you feeling? Every time I went into a hospital, they had a checklist. Are you suicidal? Do you have a plan? They never asked, how are you feeling? I kept saying, I'm suicidal. That's all I would say. No one ever said to me, what are the feelings under suicidal? Because suicidal's not a feeling. So I wish that, I don't know, some of them will, certainly a lot of them will ask that question, but I think I would like to see them do more creative things. There's people who are too shy to talk. And I'd like to pull out crayons and a paper and say, show me that feeling. I'd love to see that more. But I'd like them to be able to go deeper into how are you feeling. Yeah, not just like write it down and then move on to the next question.
There could have been a chapter on mental health professionals who said terrible things to our patients.
Yeah, right?
I did not want to have a chapter, because I just got a grant from $10,000, not from Mackenzie Scott, but that's actually money I'm allowed to spend. I'm sure they won't let me touch the Mackenzie Scott money. I'm going to send it to all the medical schools and social work programs and psychology programs in America. Learn from people's experience.
Yeah.
We didn't want, Jordan and I had a debate about this. There were so many people who said, you're going to need a custodian. You're never going to get better. You live in this state hospital. You're never going to have a relationship. I got to tell you something. I know I sucked at calculus and organic chemistry. Why would I think I would know the future of a human being? Like, a person's vulnerable right now, snapshot, at age 25. The movie of their life is completely different than the snapshot. That's one of the other points of the book. A lot of people extremely ill, extremely vulnerable, people who've been homeless, people who've struggled with all kinds of things, are thriving in the book. Mental health practitioners don't always see the movie. You work in a hospital, you see sick people who are acute. They're out in 10 days. Just don't make pronouncements. So we took about 3 pronouncements out of 30. I got to tell you, it's not good. So I'm a card-carrying member of the mental health profession, and I'm not proud to say a lot of people said, well, they said I'd never get better, and then I overcame it. One person was told at a state hospital in Minnesota they would never get better. Then she finds NAMI Duluth, right? Probably 11 people in that affiliate. And they said to Christine Barnard, what's your recovery plan? She said, what are you talking about? My recovery plan? They said at the state hospital I was going to be sick all my rest of my life. They said, well, let's work the problem. So it turns out she gets DBT. She works the problem as a special kind of psychotherapy based on coping strategies to help with dysregulation. No calculus required, right? It's a coping strategy. You learn how to anticipate desperate feelings, and you organize a list of coping strategies. Christy is now running an affiliate for NAMI in Douglas County, Wisconsin. She has a dog. She has love. She has a job. And she was told she was never going to get better. So we picked a few of the stories, just a few, to illustrate for the mental health professionals. Go really light on your long-term forecast. It's like the weather. What's the weather going to be like in Philly on May 18th? I can't tell you. It'll probably be a nice day. Yeah. Might not be a nice day, right? Probably, but you can't really say. You could get a rainstorm for 4 days. You could get a hurricane come up the coast. You just don't know. So that was one of the things that I want mental health practitioners So one of the things in a chapter about recovery is don't believe a negative prognosis. We put it right there in the book because the mental health practitioners somehow occasionally fall into this, need to tell people their future. There are no tarot cards in our field that are any good. We can't really predict who's going to do well. The things that you know will help somebody: love, support, strategies, creativity, boom and boom, right? Those are things that are extremely positive as predictors. But you can't, I've never said to a person, you're going to need these medicines the rest of your life. They say, do I need these medicines the rest of your life? I said, I have no idea. Why don't we work together? Sounds to me like you have a lot of side effects. Do you want to go lower on the dose? And then if you have a recurrent symptoms, why don't we work together to learn from that? I have you on 300. Do you want to go down to 250? We could see, note the symptoms, talk to me. You want to bring your wife in or your mother? Like, they might observe something that you can't see, because this is a tricky business. Not always easy to see yourself. That's what I want mental health practitioners to do, is humility. Right? We're just not that good. We're not that good. And this was, I could have done a whole chapter, but I didn't want to alienate the mental health professionals. Really? No, I'm not kidding, because I want them to read the book, because they're a target for this book. Okay.
My advice is I think you should write that chapter. No,
Maybe we'll do a sequel on it.
I think if you're a clinician or a mental sorry, Ken, I'm making you do work. I'm sorry. If you're a clinician, call NAMI and ask NAMI to come out and see what you're doing, and ask a peer to come out and see what is going on. Also, if you're tired, if you're a mental health professional and you're like worn out, and this is like, don't quit. Just come and do a thing like this and listen to somebody, a peer who's gotten through a little. I still struggle really, really, really hard sometimes. But come and listen to this, because this is what's possible for every one of the people that you work with, and on different wavelengths in the spectrum. But this kind of, I feel fulfilled, this kind of fulfillment, and asking people that you're serving if they're happy. A lot of people, I go in as NAMI and I ask people if they're happy, and they say no one's ever asked me that. But sometimes it takes a person who's been through this system and been through that hospital or been through that clinic to know, a little bit of what could be improved. And so it never hurts to ask a peer to come in and check it out.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, we're both going to say something. Go ahead, Janet.
One is, I would like to see clinicians do more of their own personal work. I've worked with a lot of them who I felt like I could have been their therapist. I feel a little embarrassed to say that, but honestly, I could tell a lot of them haven't done much deep work. And the other one is the pause. When you're working with us, pause when we tell you something. Don't go into fix-it mode and try to ask the next question and get to try to fix it. Just sit with me. Feel the feeling with me. Go into the silence with me, because there's a lot of pain in the silence, and I need you to be with that with me, to trust you.
Yeah, thank you. The last thing I'll say is the state of Iowa is extremely interested in NAMI's programs. And at their medical schools, the University of Iowa and Des Moines University, they're doing all kinds of NAMI programming. So on the book tour, when Jordan and I go to Iowa, we're going to be meeting with the people at the medical school. We're going to give them dozens of books. And we're going to say, you want your doctors to understand this. How do we take what you're doing, for whatever reason, that nice little state right in the middle, long on corn and college football, they get it. They're into this. So Des Moines University, University of Iowa are the leading schools that they want all the doctors that are created to understand NAMI and the work we do. So it isn't universal. And, I'll be sending a book to all the people in all the medical schools, but how many of them are ready to read it, right? I mean, it's great as a doorstop, but I'm ready. You want somebody who's like, something, there's value in learning from Janet and from Nick that you can't get anywhere else. So anyway, it's a great question. And clearly we could wax for hours on that question, because we see a need. Yes?
Yes, I don't know if you remember me, probably not, but many moons ago we were neighbors when you lived in a big purple house in that.
Oh my God, let's go.
I was in Michelle, so.
Oh my God. So this is our college football polite driving years. Yes, yes.
Right, exactly.
I was in the next house in Ann Arbor. Yes, hi.
I'm from Raina's husband.
Oh, yay. So nice to see
I
you.
want to talk to you a bit about the superheroes that you were referring to, and really the kind of get your perspective on what these guys are against a system that is in many ways broken. It's been chronically underfunded in terms of serious mental illness. And I think COVID has brought out depression, anxiety, and that's become much more mainstream, which is a good thing. But sort of the deep end is serious mental illness is, in my view, chronically underfunded. And I wonder if you're seeing anything on the policy side in terms of money actually starting to flow towards hospitals and institutional care, transitional housing, beds, that are needed for some people sometimes for long periods of time, because the burden on families is just intense and just ongoing.
Well, it's really nice. Did you come all the way from Michigan for this book event?
We're Philadelphia residents.
Oh, yay. Because I'm coming to Ann Arbor, right? So I just want to say I'll be happy to take you back to the brown jug. So all of this is state by state, right? So one of the many reasons this is a fragmented, chaotic, underfunded system that could not be more dysfunctional if you designed it to be dysfunctional. And that's in this chapter called How to Find Help, Minding the Many Gaps. The first thing you have to accept is each state is different. In some places, like California, each county is different. Mind blown. How much supported housing there is in Contra Costa, Cayo Costa County is different than in the Sacramento's County, is different because local boards are making decisions. So basically, state revenue is the best predictor of mental health stability. And in recessions, I mentioned a little story. I was the acting commissioner of mental health in Massachusetts during the recession of 2003. And I took the job because nobody wanted the job. And I thought, I study political science. That was actually my original interest. I should try this. My first day, they hand out an org chart. They closed the Department of Mental Health. What does it tell you? In the recessions, everything goes backwards. And when the sun is shining, you get very little dune replacement, if you don't mind a mixed metaphor. So our services erode when there's no money, and they don't come back when there's sunny days. And it's the damnedest thing. So the Biden administration has done better to advance federal money, the 988 number, instead of calling 911 and getting a police response. That's federal money. That's all NAMI, by the way. NAMI did most of the heavy lifting. ICANN didn't do anything. The policy team, I worked on the book and they worked on the policy thing. But how much supported housing is there? Mon Dieu. It's all going to be whatever the Philadelphia, regional team decides. And there's always lines. It's always chronically underfunded. I did a lot of work on the mental health parity bill. I think the fact that insurance companies didn't pay for anything re-supported the idea that this stuff wasn't real. And so I spent a lot of time when I was in my 40s testifying for this. And so I used to have a private practice after I had the day job. And I just saw 3 patients a week. And they would have the following benefit: $500 a year for outpatient psychotherapy and 2 hospitalizations. And I'm like, well, if you had diabetes, what would you get? Oh, unlimited visits with you and unlimited hospitalizations. I'm like, what? So this got me really interested in versions of mental health parity. So now it's harder for insurance companies to discriminate per se. You can have more hospitalizations and more visits. Now they just underpay things. So the providers say, something, I'm just going to take private pay. So the game has morphed. So you're absolutely right about every single thing you said. It's underfunded. It's, hasn't really, seen a meaningful step up in a lot of ways. There are models like supported housing which do work. So you give, instead of saying to a person who's on the edge of homelessness, you take your meds and get sober and then we'll give you a house. That's model A. Model B is, do you want a house? They say, yes, I want a house. Okay, here's the keys to the house. Don't screw it up with your neighbors. We don't care if you take meds or if you drink, but you have to conform to the rules of the neighborhood. That's supported housing. Samson Burris developed that in New York City. That costs money. An agency has to support those apartments. Then you have to have an outreach worker pop in on someone, right? Check in on them, not to give them their meds, because you're not required to take your meds and you're not required to be sober. It's a more creative, engaged model. Randomized controlled trial, the outcomes are the same. They're the same. As many people are in supported housing 2 years later, with either model, making people take their meds, making them get sober, or giving them a place and saying, work with your neighbors. Like, don't get yourself kicked out. You still got to conform to the rules of the world. So the answer is, I don't think COVID has helped the serious mental illness funding streams. I haven't seen it. I do think mental health is a we thing, not a they thing, but the rates that went up were depression, anxiety, and addiction. Now, fortunately, most people can identify with them, and I think that's been one of our challenges in the more serious end of the pool, right, is that people say, it's a you thing, that's a they thing. So NAMI's working the problem. It's really humbling to see the consistent problems. On my second day, after they told me they were closing the Department of Mental Health, they wanted to close the state hospital and 5 of the community mental health centers. They didn't know that I'd worked at one of the community mental health centers, and under no circumstances would I close in the community mental health centers. But like the dilemmas they put me in, this is just one recession, one guy. I mean, like, I pretended to close the state hospital. They gave me all the community mental health centers back. I knew the state hospital was unclosable because it was in the second largest city. So everybody in Worcester hates people in Boston because we have all the offices and make all the decisions. So I said, okay, if you give me all the community mental health centers, those are rounding error. They're not rounding error. They're saving lives every day. Let's go after Worcester State Hospital. And this is grossly sociopathic thing I was doing. I knew it was unclosable. I knew it was unclosable because it was the largest employer in the city of Worcester. So then they came back and they said, you're terrible people. I said, I know, right? But we saved all the community mental health centers. Then they said, why don't we rebuild a new Worcester State Hospital? And there was a $500 million bond, and there's a beautiful new facility there.
Built it.
It's gorgeous.
Oh,
actually.
I wonder, it was
It's
horrible.
gorgeous. But it's still not enough beds. It's still too few. You know, I tried to get one of my patients into the Worcester State Hospital, and the state medical director, which is a job I once had, said, you know, Ken, it's really not for people in the community. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, all the judges use all the beds for people in corrections. And I'm like, no. This guy needs to be on clozapine, this life-saving compound. You can't really do that with a 7-day stint in a private hospital that is trying to extract money from the system, right? So you're absolutely right. It's still all terribly broken. And so, and each system is broken in its own way. So when I was trying to save the community mental health centers in Massachusetts, 2003, that recession, every recession, this crisis happens all across America for the commissioner of mental health, right? In every single state. Those jobs are terrible. Be nice to those people. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning every single day and paced the house and paced the house and paced the house. What on earth could I do? How could I not close the community mental health centers? I'm like, okay, let's go long on the thing that I know can't be done. But that was so stressful, and I left within a year. I couldn't take it. Like the pressures. You know, we need more services, and when they're out of money, what do they want to do is they come after mental health. That's what they come after. They don't come after roads. Roads were fine. They love roads. Like, okay, roads, there was the big dig was happening. Oh, we got to fund the big dig. Billions of dollars, state money going into the big dig. I'm like, well, dudes, you need the community mental health centers. Like, they're like the lifeblood of the, you know, all these are our, anyway. So the answer is I don't think it's really made a material difference. Some states are ahead of others. NAMI used to do a cool project called Grading the States. And I asked to bring that back. Because you say to the state mental health authority, how many supported housing beds do you have? How many state inpatient beds do you have? Do you have an early psychosis program? Do you have dual diagnosis program? Do you pay for peers? And I'll just tell you one story. The state of New York refused to reply to us. So we had all 50 states, and the state of New York was too busy to reply to us. We had a large letter. The state of New York was too busy to reply to the people who use their services. That's what we wrote in our 50-page report. That was 2009. In 2012, they gave us a very detailed report of every single bed, every single outreach worker, every single supported housing that they paid for peers, because I think it caused them some distress. They were too busy. We just sent them a survey. You have 6 months. Let us know. We're grading the states. We're the people who use your services, you know. Do you have a clozapine service? You know, what do you have? Or all the things that all the people need, right? And anyway, so it's only one state that was too arrogant to reply. And then that person got fired, I think. And I'm not saying it's because of us, but I hope it was because of us. And then the next person comes in and they gave us a comprehensive, very thoughtful report. And New York is not actually the most terrible state. They were the most unresponsive state. So the whole field is no transparency. You don't know if you live in Bucks County, if they have more housing than a king of Prussia, than in, let's pick another fun place, the Amish country, right? How would you know that? You couldn't know that. And one of the things about the book that I try to do is I try to have the first person experience be more transparent. But that doesn't really replace the system not being transparent. Do you know what I mean? And it's very hard to discern from the outside what's going on. So we had, I won't keep going, but I'm sorry to say we haven't really made much progress. And I think it's going to take the continued work of all the people in this room and all the people on all the little book tour stops. We draw about 30, 50 people every stop. That's what it's going to take, because we haven't taken this, very seriously as a society. I do think health insurance companies no longer blowing off everything related to mental health is a step forward. I do think that's a material step forward, because I went to work for a health insurance company to figure out how I could wangle as much benefits as I could and get rid of co-pays and paperwork and all that stuff. And it turns out they're all quite malleable. All those benefits are super malleable. All you need is somebody to take a job, and have your friends make fun of you because you're not helping people anymore. That was me. And then I was like, I got rid of all their paperwork. And they're like, hey, you're cool. I'm like, I know, right? And then I got rid of the co-pays. And they're like, that's really cool. Could you do more stuff? I'm like, dude, you making fun of me. Because, I took a job with a health insurance company. All I wanted to do was understand how you could move it. They were charging $25 a day for methadone. You'll be interested in this. And it wasn't because they were being evil. They were being thoughtless. In the middle of an opiate epidemic, Massachusetts was very hard hit in the opiate epidemic. They were charging people a medical benefit copay every single day, $6,500 a year. How many people were using it, you might ask? 6. Okay. So then I get them to release the copay, and it went up to $800. Now, what did that cost? 2 cents per member per month. Saving lives, 2 cents. But somebody had to work the problem and get to know the person, an actuary, and then you refer the person, an actuary's daughter, to a good therapist. Like, you have to work all these relationships. I don't recommend any of this. And this is why it's so hard. It's so hard. So a long answer, a long disjointed answer, but it's so nice to see you. Yes, in the back.
Okay, I'm Brian. What is it? I was just going to say you guys are so courageous, and you probably give a lot of superheroes a run for their money, because showing your weakness is the ultimate form of strength.
Yes.
So I commend you for that. It's like a conjoined question, so you can either answer one or the other. It doesn't matter. First, it's like the first part is knowing what you know now, because you guys are talking about some of the challenges you guys face, especially when you're children in school. Knowing what you know now, what would you say to your younger child version of yourself? Or you could answer the question, in your recovery journey, what has been a word or a phrase that has kept your momentum?
I talk to my little Janet, my inner child, all the time. I write to her, I write letters to her and send them out. I give it to a friend who sends it to me. I would tell her, tender, be so tender with every single emotion. Just love it, everything that happens. Hold it. Get a stuffed animal, I put my face on it. When I was a kid, I'd hold it. I would do that for her, little Janet now. And my quote that saved my life it's from A Course in Miracles. It says, all of your past except its beauty is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing.
That's beautiful, and I forgot anything I was just going to say. But I am awful with myself. I am really hard on myself, and I would just tell little Nikki that you're okay just the way that you are, and there's going to be tons of people who tell you that you're not okay as you are and will try to change you, but you are okay as you are. You're going to make it through, and it's not about what's wrong with you. It's about what happened to you. Not as pretty, but... And thank you for being here, Brian and Christian. I appreciate you. They're from NAMI Bucks County.
Yeah. Richard.
Yeah. So Ken, talk to me about the beginning of NAMI. Like, who were those brilliant psychiatrists or mental health professionals or patients or peers who got together and said, something's not working. We need this alliance. And what's the evolution?
It was the people who were mistreated by psychiatrists. So back in the day, my field is full of problems. And why they think you need calculus to be part of it is still, I'm going to go to my grave now. So there was a theory in the 1970s and 80s and 60s and 50s that schizophrenia was caused by cold mothering. And this hypothesis, very famous, was the schizophrenogenic mother. And it wasn't like two people. It was a psychoanalytic application of a bad theory. And these mothers, including one woman we interviewed who's 100 years old, like, well, wait a second. I think this is kind of BS because John has schizophrenia, but Stacy's fine, Vicky's fine, and Tommy's fine. If we were horrible, cold mothers, wouldn't all of them have this thing? So they then say, wait a second. They're closing state hospitals. This is now the Community Mental Health Center Act and deinstitutionalization. They're sending these kids home to us. They're in their 20s, typically. This is the modal person. And, like, they're not giving us any support. They're not helping us. And Lori Flynn, who was the CEO of NAMI in the 90s, said to me, her quote is, "You had to pay to get blamed." So you're being blamed by psychiatrists for your kid's vulnerability. So they said, you know something? This is absolutely ridiculous. And there's not enough housing. There's not enough supports. They're kicking our kids out of state hospitals. So this started to bubble up all across America. So there's Parents of Adult Schizophrenics in San Mateo County. There's the Washington Alliance for the Mentally Ill. A group pops up in Michigan. And to make a long story short, they convene in 1979, 284 people come together at what is then becomes the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And it was almost all family members, a few people with first-person experience, and one or two token psychiatrists. It was basically, NAMI rhymes with mommy, because the vast majority of the people were mothers, NAMI mommies, right? Most 80% at that time. So then they realized, we don't like the way we're being treated. We don't like the way our kids are being treated. We're being blamed. Our kids aren't having support, housing. There's no research going into things for our kids. So then the version 2.0 is they get together and they meet with the National Institute of Mental Health. They say, you have no game on serious mental illness. You got nothing. What's going on with that? And they're like, well, I don't know. We don't know. That's not really our thing. And they're like, no, it's your thing. And so what Lori Flynn did, and this is all explained in the book's about 3% NAMI history, but I love that you asked. She said when Shervett Fraser, who's the medical director, the director of the National Institute of Mental Health, travels around America, there's only 50 affiliates. Now there's 700. She would write, like, this is hilarious, letters, like in the post office. She would mail them to, this is pre-email, pre-everything. And she said, when Shervett Fraser comes to your local university, stand up and say, I'm with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Why aren't you doing more for people who have serious mental illness? Why are you studying college students' behavior? Why are you studying, song patterns of birds? Why are you studying things, which might have relevance, but you're not doing any research on the people we care about? And so they then doubled the NIMH budget in the 1990s, the so-called decade of the brain. That was all NAMI, mommies, and NAMI. 400,000 letters came to the first NAMI office. It was one room. After my predecessor 2 docs ago went on the Phil Donahue show, and people then wrote letters. And the NAMI office was like literally, Head House Books would be like 10x the NAMI office. They had one employee, and she took 400,000 of these letters and signatures, and they drove them to Congress. If you can imagine such a thing, they just let you right in, like security. And they said, hey, this is a big thing. You guys should do something about it. So this begins the advocacy arm of NAMI. Storytelling, education, teaching, and fighting for better. That's all part of it. So it's a really cool story. Then over time, they decided to bring people with lived experience into the game. And, first person experience. And then they have a board. They're electing people. So it's evolved over time. So the cornerstone is mothers of children with schizophrenia who were mistreated and abused by psychiatrists. And now it's a wider collection of mental health conditions, but more serious than not, right? More serious than not. So we added borderline personality disorder. A lot of people die with that condition. Mm-hmm. We added post-traumatic stress disorder. those conditions can be devastating for people's lives, people coming back from the service. There's treatments for those things too. So we've broadened it and added people with lived experience and families. I'm the only doctor. So when people say, can you bring your portfolio of doctors? Dude, that's not our thing. Our thing is amazing people. Like, we don't have doctors, we have amazing people. I have one now part-time associate medical director who, I'm coaching up. She's writing a parent's guide. She's writing the next NAMI book. Her name is Christine Crawford, Parent and Caregivers. I don't think we have a title yet, but it'll be probably something like You Aren't Alone for Parents and Caregivers, something like that. I think we're going to go with this title. We're just going to, we're going to die on that hill. We're just going on that, because that's a very NAMI thing to say you are not alone. So it didn't take me hard to think of the title of the book, because that's kind of the whole idea is you feel alone, but you're actually not alone. There was a woman who said, I interviewed 8 people who lost family members who died by suicide. It's a hard chapter to write. It's a hard chapter to read. It was a hard interviews. And the woman says, when you come to the support group, you feel like you're on an island. But I want you to know we're all on the island with you. And when people leave the group, he said there's one guy who just says, just remember, we're all here on the island. You're going out, you're leaving the group now, it's fine. You can come back to us at any time because you're not alone. And so it's kind of beautiful, the idea that the community of human experience, pain shared is pain halved, right? The Hebrews said that. It's 3,000 years old. That's before psychotherapy, that's before cognitive behavior therapy, it's before anything. Pain shared is pain halved. And it's more than pain shared is pain halved. There's creativity, brilliance, finding ways, right? There's more to it than that, but that's part of it. Thank you. It's a good question. And I couldn't believe they didn't have a book, because we have 700 affiliates across America. You go to NAMI Kalamazoo, there's people. They're going to show up at a little book talk. Like, Kalamazoo, are you kidding me? Yes. They booked us. They have a bookstore. And there's people who care. So I think NAMI's it's like my second family. It's a very beautiful part of my own little life.
I think it would be so nice to have a book about the mothers speaking. My mother had a psychoanalyst tell her that it was her fault that I was the way I was. And she would sit on the bed and look at me and cry and feel so guilty. And I would be the one trying to convince her, no, Ma, I have bipolar disorder. It's not you. Don't do this to yourself. If only she had NAMI, she didn't know about that. We didn't know.
In our interview, we didn't pick that up. So I picked a family from Montana who I got to know pretty well over the years at NAMI. They were blamed. The psychologist and the psychiatrist, they left the room. The psychologist and psychiatrist said, there's something really wrong with that family. And this guy, Gary Mihalis, you'd love this guy. He's a dentist in Montana. He walks right back in. He says, I don't know what's wrong with my son. But we ain't the problem. Like, dude, I don't know what this is. And he said, this is baloney. He told me something more upgraded and saucy. This is absolutely baloney. And, there's just no way. There's absolutely no way that our relatively functional family, so they've taught the course Family to Family 36 times in Montana. It's a 10-week, now 8-week, now 9-week course, but you get the idea. And anybody who lives in the state of Montana who has a family member who develops a mental health condition that's material, the Mihalis family's there, and they started it because they were blamed. And they said that was the worst feeling in the whole world, because there's nothing you love like your kid. Nothing. Right? And then to realize that the kid's vulnerability, somebody's telling you that it's your fault. So they said, that's it. Nobody's ever going through that again in the state of Montana. So there's only 20 people in Montana. So I think they've taught everyone in the whole state. But they're a national treasure. And it's just one little state, but they're a good example. So I had no idea. We didn't pick that up in your interview.
She had to take she had a rash or something when she was young, and when she had me, and she wasn't allowed to hold me. She hired a nurse to hold me. So she tried, And then that's the whole Freudian thing was just
some Freudian said that's the reason. Right. So
right.
We're not that good.
No.
I just want to make it clear, we're not that good.
No.
Good question. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for asking that question. So Eleanor Owen, the woman who's 100 years old, she was the only woman alive at the first NAMI convention. She has since passed away, but we did get her take on the first meeting, because we tried to just catch a little bit of the history. The woman who invented Family to Family is in her 80s. This is our like go-to course that's over 1 million people across America have taken, randomized controlled trial. Mary Ellen Copeland, who did the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, she's in her 80s. She was so happy to be in NAMI's first book. I can't tell you because NAMI hasn't really done enough with her.
In the book?
Of course she's in the book.
Oh, cool.
Like you, she's a star of the book.
I'm still reading
I
it.
loved how in the book Copeland wrote down, didn't she, everything, her go-to tools when she was
Yes.
in a bad place.
Yes.
Creativity, dance,
Yeah.
whatever, she
Yeah.
had 5 or 6
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
journaling, whatever.
But she had organized things that she could help herself with. And these are tools, and it might not work for the next person who's buying this book or for the next family. But there are people who are working these problems, and there's a lot of life and lessons in them. I can't tell you what a privilege it was to do this book. Jordan is the only person who knows, like me, how cool it was to talk to somebody in Hawaii. And this was a second twist on the pandemic. Pandemic was great for the book because you could do an interview with somebody in San Antonio and Hawaii on the same day. And then the transcript could be transcribed, and then you could send them their quotes. Nick, are you okay with this interpretation of NAMI, man? Janet, are you good with this way we talked about Suicide Anonymous to frame your quotes? Like, it was incredible because I had flown to Hawaii to interview one amazing person, right? Like, you could see how that book could take 9 years. And we were able to kick this out. Now, I did only, in the book proposal, I said I was going to interview 40 people. And so many amazing people came up to us. And so we interviewed somebody and they said, oh, you can't do this book without talking to Carol. I'm like, okay, we'll send an email to Carol. Keep going. It was like this giant, beautiful game of telephone. Like absolutely beautiful. So I meet your sister. And your sister volunteered. She said, I really think, my sister and I have improved our relationship. Siblings aren't talked about enough, which is absolutely true.
That I want to mention
Yeah.
is my sister's message is really important, which is that got to pay attention to the siblings, what they're going through, because they get pushed aside while the parents are really super focused on this mess in front of them. So, yay for the sibling, attention to the sibling.
Yeah, so, I worked with Cynthia. She volunteered to be in the book while we were complaining about how poorly our program was run, just like day-to-day life. And I said, well, I'm leaving. I'm going to do a book. Oh, I want to be in your book. And then I learned from talking to her about Janet. So some of these, most people just volunteered. But occasionally I'd hear somebody, like I heard somebody on National Public Radio. He started mental health coaching in the black barbershops of America. Lorenzo Lewis. Wow. He's the coolest dude ever. And I listened to him on National Public Radio, and I scratched on an index card, interview Lorenzo Lewis when doing book, right? Then I'd throw it in the glove box, right? And I'd see somebody on TV. I say, interview Diana Chow when write book. Then, of course, I couldn't find anything in the glove box, or I sold that car, or whatever. But I had been keeping a list, because I've been working on this one idea, that there's beauty and wisdom in real people. And that is a story that hadn't been told. So it took me a year to find Lorenzo Lewis. I'm like, what the heck is that guy's name? Then it's alliterative, the black barbershop thing. Can I find that guy? I found him. He was the last person we interviewed. He was number 130. Like, we were already done with the interviews. We were already working on writing and quotes, and the publisher was beating me up because they wanted 100 pages less. We're into that process. Then I'm like, Jordan, we got to interview this guy. She's like, you've got to be kidding me. Another guy? We got to interview this guy. I can't live without this guy. This guy was the first guy I tried to find the day after we got the book deal. Anyway. So, true story. So that's how it kept growing, and we could have kept going because so many people are ready to help other people. That's the motivation. People wanted to be in the book. They didn't get paid, right? NAMI gets all the royalties. They
You
wanted
don't get paid for this?
Wait, what?
What?
Wait, what? Right? Wait, what? So the whole idea is people want to make meaning of what they went through, and you can never do anything better than helping another person. And that's why the whole project is this gorgeous, just pay it forward adventure. And it's been such a privilege, I just have to say, to meet Janet, to meet Nick, to work with Jordan, and how fun. Yes, you have a question?
I do. NAMI is such a grassroots organization. Following up, Jordan tells me that the book has sold out many places because people buy a copy for themselves, then they buy a copy for someone that wants it, then they buy a copy for someone who doesn't know they need it but does. And so who would you like us to give our second copy to?
Wow, what a good question. All right, so I'm in Plymouth, Massachusetts at a little Mickey Mouse affiliate. They have 100 books. I signed 100 books. We sold 100 books. And so one of the women come up and she said, I'm buying 10 books. And I said, could you go to the back of the line, please? And so here's the following thing. Dear Tina, thank you for supporting Katie. Dear Janet, thank you for supporting Katie. Dear Tom, thank you for supporting Katie. And then Dear Dr. Smith, who still doesn't get it, right? I didn't write that. I said, best wishes, Dr. Smith. Kendo. I just signed my name. So some people, I would say a third of them are bought as gifts for someone. About 10% of them are in memory of someone who has died. And like a good example would be a mother wants to give one to her nieces. She's lost her sister, and she wants the nieces to have. Like, that's not uncommon. So there's some tears at the signing table. So for yourself, for somebody you care about, for your local library. Now, I'm sure Richard's all over this. 1,100 books have been sold in American libraries, right? I've already got that stat. It doesn't count for any bestseller list. I love that. That's exactly what I want. But this guy in Denver yesterday, he's made it his personal cause celeb that every library in Denver is going to get one of these books. And he said, I don't care if I have to buy them and hand it to them or I get them to buy it. It doesn't really matter to me. I want our book because it is our book. It's our people. It's our royalties. It's our copyright. By the way, I don't have the copyright. The copyright is NAMI's. So it's really, really our book. So he's going to make it a cause celeb. So they're going to be in every library in Denver. So and we were in Alaska. That's hilarious. There's only one library. I said, so somebody asked me that question. I said, well, go to your library. She says, there's only one library in Fairbanks, and we're going to get one there. Don't worry. So depends on how big or little. So I don't think there's a lot of people who couldn't benefit from this book, but I say that just with the knowledge of how common these conditions are. Tens of millions of people, and then 100 million family members, friends, co-workers, lovers, all of it. I mean, this is the human condition. So I think this book's going to keep going. We did really well. We got on the bestseller list.
You did?
We did. Yeah, so we got on the USA Today bestseller list, which is pretty fun. There's a lot of books made. Not every book makes that list. And so I think we sold 13,000 copies, plus or minus the first week of hardcovers. It's a lot of books. I think we tapped into something real, and real people are part of that. So we're just going to keep going. I'll be in Kalamazoo, hilarious, but we're going. And there'll be 50 people, and they'll be interested in this book because they care, because they love somebody or they've lived with something. They know about this. Like, I don't have to introduce the idea to anybody. Well, there's this whole thing called mental health conditions. Nobody needs that talk, right? It's not medical school. They all have lived with this.
Suggestion for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick. Your answers.
There's an organization called the Peyton Heart Project that does wonderful things, and the hearts that they make have suicide awareness tags, and they're in memory of someone who died by suicide, and they just leave them somewhere for someone who needs it. Or, as I've been in a hospital and I've come out with nothing, and I've gone to live in a recovery house. Give it to the social worker at a hospital to give to the patients who are leaving and being discharged from the hospital. The jail. I do support groups in the jail. Give it to the jail. Everyone who's coming out of a hospital needs it. Someone sitting waiting for the train needs it. Someone who doesn't know that they need it needs it. And the best way to give it to them is not to say, hey, thought you needed this book. It would be, just a gentle, passing on of it. Because I can't tell you how many times we're tabling for NAMI and someone walks up and goes, I don't need this, but she does. I understand that's your way of dealing with it. But, the people who need it most are the ones who might not be able to get their hands on it. So you donating it to somebody, oh, absolutely.
Nick is being hired to the marketing department of NAMI. We've heard that. No, he's still NAMI Bucks County. But that's a great idea. There's an audiobook. I tried to read my own book. They said they heard me read the introduction, and they're like, yeah, no, we want a professional. We want a professional. So there is an audiobook, but it is really, I did the introduction, which I think they gave to me as a courtesy. I wanted to read the whole book because I feel like NAMI's like my second family. But they're like, yeah, they listen to me, and they're like, yeah, no, we're getting a professional. So you let go, right? You win some and you lose some. I lost that one. There is an audio book. There's a Kindle book. It's been sold and resold in the United Kingdom. So we're doing a road trip to the UK. I mean, how fun is that? The Brits are ready to talk about mental health. I want you to think about that. I can't, mind blown, right? I think we're going to call it "You Are Not Alone with Scones," and that's the working UK title, something like that. Anyway, so it's a good idea. So I think libraries are a big thing that I'd like to see. I've had several people at bookstores buy an extra one and say, "Would you give this to someone who can't afford this?" And you get a little teary inside, and then the local affiliate is like, "Oh, I know who I can give this to."
Mm-hmm.
They know just the person who doesn't have $28, but they
They're
know
the person
they
who gives us the most money too. They're the people who donate the most to us, so the people who don't have it.
Yeah. Anyway, so what a great question. So I don't know, Richard, you probably want to go on to your evening.
I have nothing more enriching than this.
There we go. So maybe one more question. Yeah.
Unless, Angela, do you have anything you'd like to say in
I was
closing?
just thinking that I think people might want their book signed.
I think people are going to want their book signed. And Ken is generously, and I'm sure that...
Oh, Nick and Janet are signing your
Nick and
books.
Janet are happy
So if
What
you
a
go to the
triumph.
Kalamazoo book, you'll get Patrick Kaufman and Trevor McCauley. Here you'll get, so the three of us sign your books because it's our book, right? So if you buy a book tonight, it's all three of us. Yeah.
So let's go. They're for sale.
Let's go.
Kristen and Scarlett at the register will help you. Multiple copies are available.
Great.
And I want to just take this opportunity to thank everyone again for coming. I know it was not a great, and you guys were great. Thank you. Thank you.